Tonight, I am pleased to acknowledge Jon Huntsman, Jr. as a 2016 Utah Citizen Summit Lifetime Achieve Award recipient. And I'm honored to present this award to his wife, our former First Lady, Mary Kay Huntsman, who is accepting the award on Governor Huntsman's behalf. Mary Kay.
Thank you. This Rose Wagner Theater holds a very special place in my heart. When I walked in here, I looked up on the stage and I thought, I remember back in 2004, and some of you may have been here that evening, but two very special candidates running for governor, one was my husband and one was Scott Matheson, who we love, sat on this stage and had the most civil debate that I've ever heard. They decided at the beginning of their campaigns that neither one of them would say a negative word, and they did it. It was something that I think is an example for the rest of the country. I don't know that we can ever achieve that again, but they did it. And at the end of the campaign, when my husband ultimately won for governor, Scott Matheson and his wonderful wife came over to our hotel and said, "We want to thank you for a great campaign," shook our hands, gave us a hug. And it was a few years later that we had the Canyon Mine disaster, as many of you remember. And John looked at me and he said, "I need somebody to oversee this, the best attorney I can find. And I don't know of anyone better than Scott Matheson." So he turned back to Scott and said, "I need your help." That is what we need today. That represents exactly what we're celebrating this evening. It is a delight to be here with all of you tonight, and an incredible honor for me to be able to accept this wonderful award from my husband. John so badly wanted to join us, but he's out doing what he does best. He's trying to find peace and stability in the Middle East, leading a delegation of experts and trying to find solutions, the same thing he loved doing as governor of this great state, then as U.S. ambassador to China, bridging differences and finding common ground. You special guests here tonight and fellow awardees are no strangers to consensus building and problem solving. It's the most important thing community leaders can do. Unfortunately, as we all know, there sometimes is not enough of it. I was reminded tonight as I turned on the TV and saw the incredible riots. My first reaction was, this can't be our country. What has happened? I thought of our two boys in the United States Navy and all those in our military. They do not ask what party their president is. They salute and they serve. You all here tonight give us hope that one day we will find that we are all united again as Americans. Thank you so much, and thank you for this great honor.
Congratulations to all of our wonderful recipients for their collective hard work and their tremendous example and their inspiring vision for not only us here in Utah, but our entire nation. Thank you to our former First Lady, Mary Kay Huntsman. In your own right, and we all of us in this room know, you had a gift of bringing people together, and we thank you for that, and we remember. We also recognize with you daughter, Mary Ann, who was gracious enough to bring her beautiful talents, most recently to Abravanel Hall in a wonderful concert. So welcome home, ladies. It's great to have you. Please let Governor Huntsman know, Governor Ambassador Huntsman know how much we appreciate him. Take our best wishes to him. You may have noticed that our honorees have gathered on stage and we have something unique in store. Using their expertise and skills, our award recipients will hold now a conversation about differences that challenge us and how we bridge those differences, how we go about doing this important work, bringing our communities together and healing our nation. I'll turn it over to you, Mark.
Great to be with all of you. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I think what we'd like to do is just chat up here on the stage for a few minutes about what we've learned here in Utah and also what we've learned from our years in this field. You heard all these incredibly glowing, wonderful things about us. And I'd like to share kind of what's going on in my heart, what I'm struggling with, what questions are in my mind, and ask our colleagues to do the same. And we've got 20, 25 minutes just to chat amongst ourselves, and maybe what we're going to be asking, maybe it will trigger what's the question in your heart? What's the thing you're wondering about after this election, after your time as an American citizen or as a citizen of Utah? What are you wrestling with? So that's what we'd like to share, is just what's the question burning in our heart. We obviously have found answers during our lives, but I think all of us now, we talked earlier, and we're all wrestling with questions, as you probably are too. We didn't have questions before Tuesday, we certainly have them now. Like what happened to pollsters and what happened to data. And so who would like to begin? What's the question that's burning in your heart that you'd like to share with those of us? John?
So first of all, thank you all for coming. And I think we represent something new and incoherent that's looking for voice and expression and coherence. And I think part of why we're here and you're here is to be on a journey of exploration together. So my question is really, how can we, as Americans, come together? Where can we do it? Who can support us doing it? Are there institutions that we look at who do things that could be doing other things that bring us together? And how do we each actually find people who really differ from each other and often muster up the courage to reach out to them in a personal way? And I'm wrestling with that question both at a micro level of how do I do it in my own life, at a community level, how do we do it as communities, and then at a state and national level, because I think what we know is that without relationship and without bonds of affection, we will not be able to move forward as the great country that we are.
Well, he handed me the mic, so I think it might be my turn. It's that intuition thing. My big question, and the reason I came, is because I have seen it through the work I've done, starting with Move On, that citizens are kind, they're caring, they're intelligent, and when you actually have a connection, you can do wonderful things. And yet somehow we've been losing that capacity, and we've become increasingly homogenized in our communities, where we are not getting that opportunity to speak with each other from the heart. And it's become impolite to talk politics. And we know that if people only talk to people with like-minded views, that their viewpoints just become more extreme. So we have to find a way to talk to each other with open hearts. And there are practices to do that. And the living room conversation is one very simple, self-facilitated form, but there's others. But it's when we have that desire to do so. And I've been learning lately that loving thy neighbor is one of the things we are being told in the Bible. And so in California, we have the Diocese of El Camino Real in the Episcopal Church that's started to embrace this practice. And so we're looking for leaders all around the country that want to change the dynamic so that we start calling to the best part of our capacity and our relationships. And it's fun, This is so serious right now, which it is, but it's this wonderful exploration, and my world is so much richer, as you can tell by my friendship with Jacob, because I have friends that have many different beliefs.
Beautiful. I'm just thinking maybe the National Science Foundation will come out with a study one day that says, if you want to prevent Alzheimer's, have a friend with different political points of view, It'll help churn up those neural pathways, Maybe No Label should try that, Pass that on to John and Nancy, would you? Ralph, Liz, what question's burning in your hearts?
So I think I have a question and then a confession. And my question is this: I think that now is the time for us to really ask ourselves deeply and be really brutally honest. Do we really believe in this big idea of American democracy? Because if we do, I think that we have to turn a corner. My confession is that probably about 10 years ago when we started this work, if I look back on what I was thinking, I have to be honest that there was a side of me that thought a little bit the same way that way too many of us right now are thinking, is that if only the other people would just get out of the way, we'd be good. And we'd know how to run this thing, and I think that's just sort of at the very base level of so much that we do right now. But that really isn't the idea behind this great American adventure. It is, from the beginning, the idea is that it is the straining forces of different ideas that allow us to do democracy, that allow us to self-govern without a king. And if we want to be able to do it, we've got to start seeing each other as being partners in the uneasy, difficult challenge of making good decisions.
Well, first, thank you, all of you put this together, and Karen for embarrassing me. One of the things Karen knows about me and people are close to me is I cry really easily, so forgive me for that. And for being part of this panel of national, really heroic figures around civic and civil dialogue and solutions. And I guess I can't help but come at this a little bit differently as someone who's served in office as an elected official and who's worked professionally in the field of trying to pull people together and arrive at solutions. And I think you heard in the discussion here that that we are experiencing this incredible disconnect between most of us in our everyday lives, whether it's our families or our communities or our neighbors or those who we interact with, that is warm and loving and supportive, and can contain differences agreeably. And what we see going on in politics nationally and increasingly down to state governments, and then increasingly, I'm sorry to say, even at local government. And that disconnect to me is kind of where my question is, having worked with people of good faith across all kinds of spectrums and situations to come up with solid, agreed upon solutions that aren't winners and losers, but are common solutions that are respectful of everyone's needs and views and values. How does that get translated to the elected officials where it often ends up for decision? It's something that a few elected officials bring into their world of elective service, and they refine it and they work at it. But what I have seen in politics, and it is most apparent at the national level and less so as you move to local government through state government, is that people get elected with not only good intentions, but with an open mind and heart to making good decisions in ways that you and we would all agree with probably, but that the process rewards division and underhanded actions and divisiveness. And that has become increasingly true over, I think, over this last decade. And it's something that I think most of us in this room, we've never experienced an election like what we saw this year. So my question is how do we, from the individual, family, neighborhood, community level on up through the system, translate what I think is genuine good faith efforts of bringing people together to make decisions respectfully and civilly to the ultimate decisions? so many times in my career, in fact, I would say more often than not, a community or a region has come together over how to approach a matter, only to fail when the final decisions get made that incorporate it into law. And to me, that we see it in such an extreme way with the hyperpartisanship of this last year. And maybe it will kickstart us into how we can elect the leadership or provide the impetus that the public demands of leadership to achieve the ends that we've been talking about all day.
Thank you, Ralph. I guess my question would be, before I tell you my question, I'd like to ask you a question, which is, how many of you would say that you, if asked, do you love America? Are you very patriotic? Just raise your hand if you feel that way. Well, that looks like the national average. It's about over 90% of Americans say they love America and very patriotic. And so my question for you is the question that I actually have in this process, which is, what does that mean? What does it mean to love America? Because the thing that's been challenging to me in my work is I get deeper and deeper with almost anybody, and I find out that they love America. That's why they're doing what they're doing. And it actually came from love, not always pure love. I don't know about you, but I find pure love pretty challenging, whether in my marriage or with my kids or with my friends. But the best love we can do, I find that we don't really know how to translate our love for the country in a way that comes out as love. And it ends up looking like the 2016 election. So how do we get from love to the 2016 election? And I guess that's my question. What's stopping us from getting down to that point where we actually are feeling? And I watched Van Jones and a Trump supporter on CNN the other day. And this, he was doing a little house thing. I think it was in West Virginia, or maybe it was Gettysburg, but someplace it was truly a Trump haven, and he was with a room full of Trumpites, and the first person to open their mouth was this young Trump supporter who said, Hillary's a crook, Hillary should be put in jail, and he just started firing. And Van Jones, in about 10 minutes, just talking to the guy ended up being a really beautiful young man who cared a lot about racial injustice, who wanted people to get along, who wanted education to be improved. And it took about 10 minutes to go from the rat-a-tat-tat of that stuff down to the fact that this guy loved his country. And I've had the privilege in this work of actually studying and writing about folks like Jon Huntsman, who's in my book, and of the folks here in Utah and my colleagues who are all in the book. I got the chance to study them and say, well, what's going on? And what I realize is that they love America in a certain way that I think is actually pretty important. And it's a love that's not red, and it's a love that's not blue. It's a love that's deeper than red and blue. And I'm sure many of you have that love in your heart. And I guess the question I'd leave with you today is, how do we express that love more purely so we can actually see it in each other, rather than it being hidden behind this fog of positions and colors and conventions so that's my question. How do we manifest our love so that it comes through as love? So the floor is open, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, I'll give a starting place.
Go for it.
And one of the things I'm discovering the power of listening. People want an answer, and you were talking about families staying connected, but I'll go into a room, and when people say, everyone in the room will say that some relationship has been lost or diminished by the political partisanship. And it's hurting us all, and nobody wants that. So, on some level, being okay with having differences, holding that tension and being able to love someone that is different than you is actually a very beautiful thing.
Yes.
And that is, one of the reasons why I think when it comes to leadership for this, one of my dreams is that faith communities will step into this space and lead, because it is, it's the golden rule. And we need that help right now. And that's just, it doesn't get all the way to the solutions, but just starting by being in right relationship, then I have faith that we will find a way if we can do that first foundational step.
Beautiful.
We need to change the avenues through which we communicate. We need to go back to old-fashioned relationships in our communities. Communities are the ballast of American democracy, and we've kind of let the sort of the strife in Washington flip that on its head. And so in some ways, nothing's changed before the election and after. We just know now that we have to be strong communities. And magic things happen between humans when they know each other, when they get out from behind their computer screens and know each other as human beings. And I would say that probably all of us have walked that walk very personally. And things happen, and you just go, okay, wow, I get it now, and you start to understand things from new perspectives that you didn't have before, that you cannot possibly have if you just seek out your own information silos. So in some ways, it's I like to say that really it's not really that hard what we have to do. It's changing our habits of thought. Like I mentioned before, we need to really believe that the other is our partner and makes us stronger and wiser and helps us reason, as difficult as it is sometimes, and changing our habits of association. And we have to be very intentional about it. It's not going to magically happen. We have to decide that it's got to happen.
Liz and Joan, as you were talking, it reminded me of an old story with a modern twist that I hadn't anticipated. Years ago, during one of those periods when this country was not well received abroad, a dear friend of ours traveled around the world, and she sat on a park bench with a sign said, "American willing to listen." And what I'm imagining now are park benches with signs saying, "Liberal, willing to listen," "Conservative, willing to listen," "Independent, willing to listen."
Else too. I also think we have a bigger challenge here. If you look around the world, this same challenge is roiling everywhere. And I think in the same way that American Democracy 1.0 was a guiding light in the world, I think that it could give us something to work on together to be American Democracy 2.0. That's another guiding light. I think we need one.
So the Universal Declaration of Rights enshrines a value that is not one of our values, which is dignity. And as I was reflecting on the election and really putting myself in the shoes of the winners, what I realized is how many Americans felt acknowledged for the first time in a long time, felt their winning actually allowed them to be treated with dignity. And I think that's what each of us wants. And we're certainly seeing that among those who are disadvantaged, are for racial issues or gender issues or nationalistic issues. All of us wanted to be treated with dignity. And how do we bring perhaps something new into our Democracy 2.0? It may be another value.
I think this kind of forum is incredibly valuable after what so many of us have, what we've all experienced really this week, which came as a shock whether I think you were a winner or a loser from your vantage point in the election, because it's not what all the predictions were, regardless of just about anyone you listen to. I believe it is going to start from us as individuals, from us in our interactions, from us working in our communities. You know, it's interesting, when I'd get together with my fellow mayors and local elected officials, we were always dumbfounded by what was happening at the federal level and increasingly at the state level. Because when we got together, we would talk about things we were working on in our communities, what was working, what wasn't working, and share ideas. Or as one of my favorite mayors, Rasim Reed from Atlanta, said to me one time when we were on a panel together, he goes, "God, you know what's so great about when I meet with mayors and you, Ralph, and these other mayors?" He said, I can sit down with you, I can come up with a great idea, and I can bring it home, and the first time I attribute it to you, and then after that, it's mine. And, you know, that sort of competitiveness is healthy, right? But it's not adversarial, and it's not based on some mythological ideology sometimes. And so at the local level, I really feel like sort of from the community level up, we have the best opportunity to reshape things. We heard this afternoon Natalie Gochner say, hey, you know what, maybe what's going to happen now is because it's an all-Republican Congress and a Republican president, and they're going to do away with Obamacare, and now they're going to have to come up with something, because you can't just throw it out and leave 20 million people uninsured and do that to so much of the American people, so they're going to have to come up with something else. Well, I'd love to believe that, and I'm hopeful that will happen, and it will be a wonderful surprise.
I'd like all of you to be thinking about what question's in your heart, and I wonder, Carol, do you have a question in your heart that you might want to throw into the mix here before the five of us get too comfortable up here? As you can see, we're kind of learners. We believe that learning is part of being a citizen, and so, Carol, what's on your mind? Let's see what you'll make us think about.
Well, I would just love for each one of you to give each one of us something that we can take with us from this gathering. Where do we start? Is it with us as individuals? Is it with us in our families? Is it with us in our neighborhoods or within our houses of worship, our places of work? Where do we take this good feeling? And we all agree, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But how do we do this? Where do we start? And it gives us a sense of purpose.
That's my favorite question. I mean, I'm an organizer, and living room conversations are specifically designed so that people can choose to have a living room conversation, because it's just two friends with different viewpoints, each invite two friends for a structured conversation. So you can all decide to do this tomorrow. It's all up on the website, it's open source, and we're trying to learn from everybody in the process. So, you know, knock my socks off and send back all the stories about what happened. I really would like Utah to show everybody how to do this. I mean, I've had a great time here today because you've got, I think, a more cohesive community than many, many places. And so I like to believe that, you know, we need some leadership to show this is how you do it. And it would be really awesome to see it coming out of Utah.
Liz, Ralph?
So I like props. We use them at the Village Square all the time. And one of our props is a Staples Easy button. Have you all seen that? It's a little red button. And you press it and it says, "That was easy." So I would challenge everyone to throw out their easy buttons. I think that, you know, technology, we live at a time when all sorts of things make life easier for us, and that's really wonderful. Easy is good for office supplies, but bad for democracy. And some of this, frankly, is just hard. And so do something that's different than what's normal for you. You know, stretch, reach. It always ends up really good. It turns out well when you do. It's a wonderful adventure, so just can your easy button.
So we have, you know, great examples here with the Village Square, with living room conversations, and in the arenas that we follow and work in. There are, I would say, dozens of these kinds of endeavors going on around the country, and I mean dozens. Every community, it seems like I go to, I was in Columbus last week, and they just had something they called the Big Table. They were expecting maybe 500 people, and they got 5,000 for a conversation about Columbus, okay? They had modeled it after Chicago. So these things are happening around the country, and we need them, and we need to learn to communicate well. But given the era that we live in, where social media and other ways we have to connect ourselves, what what I think would be an incredible challenge at a broader level is to figure out how to network all of this work and all of the people who are willing to be involved in it to actually form some national momentum that is different than the almost hysteria we see in the national media and in the TV and in some of the national political discussions we've suffered through this year.
Well, I'll throw two things quickly into the mix. One is go to your computer and click on allsides.com. And when you go to allsides.com, you'll get the news from the left, from the right, and from the center every day. So at one source, you can have the equivalent of 3 newspapers giving you all that's going on. And allsides.com is partnering with Joan and Living Room Conversations, trying to go into the schools so kids can learn what these different points of view look like and start to think for themselves and not get hooked into some red-blue trap, but actually start to go, what do I think? What are my values? What do I believe? So allsides.com. Anybody with a computer can do that. Anybody associated here with a university or a student at a college, go to Bridge USA, bridgeusa.org. It's an organization started by Cortland Carpenter, who's here in the front row, and it's on several campuses across the country and wants to come to Salt Lake. And the concept has been very simple, that if we have a problem of a red-blue polarization, the stupidest thing we could do would be to have campuses with red-blue clubs where you can join the red or blue club. So the Bridge USA is basically saying, let's bring the spirit of Silicon Valley to civic renewal. Let's have a place where we come up with new ideas, where we bring red and blue together, where we have conversations across the divide. So look up Bridge USA and spread it around. If you've got college students, tell them about it. If you're a college student, do it yourself. So Carol, that's 2 thoughts for me. Over to you, John.
Carol, thank you for your question. So, allsides.com, Village Square, Living Room Conversations, Bridge USA, and some of the dozen of organizations that Ralph referred to are actually part of a network called the Bridge Alliance. And if you go to bridgealliance.us, you can see about 45 organizations that represent a vast expanse in this field. And you can sign up individually to get information once a week about what we're all doing. Secondly, one of those organizations is called the Charter of Compassion. There's a Compassionate Cities movement in this country that is alive here in Salt Lake. You can find it at charterofcompassion.org. And then tomorrow, out of Washington, D.C., and I think, again, Ralph, what you and others are saying, something is emergent here. As an old friend of mine once said, it's as if the organism is organizing to save itself. There'll be a day of healing and reconciliation put on by a colleague of ours named Stephen Dinan and another colleague, Rich Taffel, who in the late 90s founded the Log Cabin Republicans. And I think the website is just dayofhealing.us. And then to put in a plug for our sponsors, these dialogues can continue, and we can share these conversations and experiences and connect with others on an exclusive social networking platform that Camille and John Kessler and others have put together called You Begin, and you can find it on what is now our website, utahcitizensummit.org, where we can also find 2 amazing conversations about the state of our country moving forward, which we had this afternoon. Thank you all.
Here's what we all want. The headline, Civility has returned to America, and it started in Utah. Please let me do that story. We can do this. We can. It can happen here. Thank you, Mark Gerzon, John Steiner, Liz Joyner, Joan Blades, and Ralph Becker. You are models and you inspire people everywhere, and you certainly have inspired us. We can move forward. We now have some useful tools to help us address important issues and become a more civil, compassionate, and effective way. Now, I will ask John Steiner to come forward and announce the next steps for what will be a national initiative. His announcement will be followed by some brief remarks from Mark Gerzon. Mark will wrap up our celebration with a challenge to all of us to come together in a meaningful and sustaining way. Gentlemen?
Thanks, Carol, and thank you, John, for your wonderful introduction. It's always interesting to look into the bright lights and almost see who's out here. So at least half of what I was going to say, I just said, because I think what's moving forward is happening, and our next steps about how we come together is happening, and part of our job is to share with you what we know, and part of your job is to share with us what you know and what you're finding out, because I think we're in something new together. We know we can't keep moving back and forth between left being in charge and right being in charge, and then one undoing the other, and the other undoing what the other undid. It doesn't work. And so my passion about us moving forward is actually a new constituency, a transpartisan constituencies of citizens across the divides, not a third party. We're transpartisan Democrats, transpartisan Republicans, transpartisan independents, or even transpartisan non-voters who really want to work together to see ourselves and our leaders solve problems. And the appreciative inquiry I think we're engaged in is, how do we do this? That's another one of my questions. I had a better idea before Tuesday, but that's my passion and my koan and what I'm sitting with on a daily basis. So actually, I just want to take a moment of silence for us to sit with where we are right now, and the fact that this Citizen Summit, which is something Mark and I and others have dreamed about for 2 years, has happened today because of you all here, and to express our admiration, our gratitude, and a celebration of what's happening, and just to take it in and feel it and be with it in quiet for a moment. An old Zen teacher of mine once said, when it comes out of silence and you do it naturally, that is true activity. And I think that's what we've seen today. So once again, such gratitude to all of you, to all of us.
Great to be with all of you, and I do want to say a closing word about what I think is possible. I started by saying that the question in my heart was, how do we love America? And I remember back as an elementary school student in Indianapolis, Indiana, in the 1950s, one of the most conservative places at one of the most conservative times. It makes modern-day conservatism look liberal by comparison. We said, I pledge allegiance to the United States of America. That's how we pledge allegiance to the United States of America. And I think that was intended to be an act of love. Wasn't that what we were expressing? Not just loyalty, but I think we were expressing love. But again, this entire generation that was saying the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States of America just gave us the 2016 election. So I want to share with you some reflections on what I've learned about love, because I don't know about you, but I've had to learn about love when it comes to loving my wife. I've had to learn about love when it comes to loving my kids. It's not surprising that I've had to learn about what it means to love my country. And I want to share with you 3 things that I've learned from my friends and colleagues who are doing this work about what love means. And the first thing that I think it means from my point of view is, if you're loving, you're learning. If you're really loving someone or something, you have to learn. If I loved my wife today the same way I loved her the day we got married, I wouldn't be loving her very well, because I've had to learn after year, what does it mean to love her? So it's not surprising that learning, from my point of view, is part of loving. And for me, that means today, if I want to really learn about America, I'd better talk to the 60 million people who voted for a candidate that I thought shouldn't be president. I'd better talk to them. I'd better sit down with them. I'd better go a little deeper than I have to really learn who they are and to really find a way to love them. Not judge them, not put them in a basket of deplorables, but to love them. Isn't that part of the mandate? And if I were, I've also got to learn to love some other people. But the key thing for me is learning. If I'm not learning, I don't feel like I'm really doing justice. And I think many of the organizations that have just been honored tonight, as well as No Labels, it's all about learning. You can't just go out with your red or blue solution and argue it. You actually have to go out and learn. And that's something that our politicians don't model. Did you hear ever in this election from any candidate say, I learned so much from that debate. I learned so much from listening to so-and-so. No, they don't learn anything, because learning is seen as a sign of weakness. So you just spout your little tried and true liberal or conservative comments and call that, leadership. Well, I look forward to seeing a leader who learns. So that's the first thing I've learned about love. It's about learning. The second thing I've learned, and it's also present in all the groups that we've just heard, and it's been present in the day that we've been privileged to share here. The other word about loving is relationship. Think about it. What does love mean without relationship? Even loving yourself is about relationship to oneself. And if you think about it, we've just been through a year, actually 18 months, that was all about victory. It was all about victory. It was all about winning. It was all about who's going to control the House, who's going to control the Senate, who's going to control the White House. Was there even a word about relationship? Well, starting on Wednesday, we woke up to the truth, which is that it's about relationship. If Hillary had won, it would be about her relationship to the Republicans. Now that Trump has won, it's about his relationship to the Democrats. Because if that relationship is bad, there'll be stalemate, acrimony, and a continuing careening from left to right. So relationship is at the heart. Ambassador Hal Saunders, who worked at the State Department for many years, wrote a book called Politics is About Relationships. When you heard Ralph being honored, a lot of that's about relationship. When you listen to Ben talk about the way he serves his mayor, it's about relationship. So that's the second thing I've learned. Yes, it's about winning, but it's also about relationship. And when Martin Luther King was in the Birmingham jail, there he was, and what did he write? He said, our struggle is not about victory. It's about reconciliation. It's not about winning. It's about relationship. If he can see that after being thrown in jail by a racist police force, can't we find that as Americans in 2016? So learning and relationship. And the third thing I've learned about loving our country, which has also been present in every comment you've heard today, is problem solving. If you love someone and you're in a relationship and something comes up, what's the natural thing you want to do? Well, whatever relationship, and you noticed, if you just take a position and argue your position, and it's about position taking, that's not going to get you very far. We have to actually go from position taking to problem solving and actually say, I care about making this world or making this country better because we were together, because of our love and because of our relationship, we made this better. And I think whether we're talking about safe schools or internet privacy or outsourcing jobs to China or how to fix the economy or immigration or you name it, we have to be problem solvers, not position takers. And that grows out, for me, of love and relationship. So when I tried to distill what this movement to reunite America is about, those were the three principles that I found. And I think they're the key to governance. They're the key to ending this endless campaign. And I mean endless campaign. I don't mean it ended on November 9th. The scholars who've really studied this say we've entered a world, America now, that's in an endless campaign. It never switches from campaigning to governance. It's now time to switch from campaigning to governance, and we need to do that by learning, relationship, and problem solving. That's the challenge we face. So for me, I think I'm going to say I pledge allegiance, and I don't say this just because it's the title of my book. It's my own personal commitment to myself. I pledge allegiance to the reunited States of America, one nation indivisible. And we have to reunite this country. It's not a passive thing where we go to school and say, I pledge allegiance, now go play football. No, we've got to actually reunite it. We have to reunite it. And that's what Jefferson wanted. Jefferson said, every generation, and for that he meant 19 years, by the way, every generation has to reinvent democracy. So we're a few years overdue. So I ask you to join all of us and join the Utah Citizen Summit team and pledge allegiance to the United States of America. And let's make Utah, I guess my closing vision for you all would be, I'll join Carol in seeing her headline and say, I'd love to see Utah actually send a message to the rest of the country that says we love our state, we're going to get along with each other, we're going to be red and blue and libertarian and green, but we're going to take care of each other, we're going to take care of our state, and we're not letting you come in here every 2 to 4 years and divide us and turn us against each other. We're going to make Utah great. We're going to be stronger together. Thank you.